Famous people who passed away in 1735. Before we proceed, please subscribe to our channel to support us. John Arbuthnot. He was born in April 1667 and he died in February 1735. His age was 67 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. John was a Scottish physician and writer whose satirical works alongside Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope defined the intellectual and political discourse of his time. He is best remembered for his contributions to mathematics, his membership in the Scribblers Club, where he inspired Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels book, The Third, and Alexander Pope's Peribathus, or The Art of Thinking in Poetry, memoirs of Martin Scribblers, and possibly the Dunciad for inventing the figure of John Bull in his midlife, complaining of the work of Edmund Carlo, among others, who commissioned and invented a biography as soon as an author died, said, "Biography is one of the new terrors of death, and so biography of Arbuthnot is made difficult by his own reluctance to leave records." Edward Howardan. He was born in April 1662 and he died in April 1735. His age was 73 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Edward Howardan was an influential English theologian who played a key role in theological debates, advocating for Catholicism during a period of religious tension in England. The impending revolution against James forced Howardan to return to Douai, where he soon preceded DD and was installed into the chair of divinity. One of his students was the historian Hugh Trottel. In 1702, he was persuaded to take part in the concurrence for one of the royal chair of divinity in the university. But the influence of a hostile minority secured the installation of another candidate by mandatory letters from the court. Shortly afterwards, complaints were lodged at Rome that the Douai professors, Howardan in particular, were propagating the errors of Jansenism. Howardan was dismissed from the university, but a subsequent official investigation completely exonerated all. William Darham. He was born in November 1657 and he died in April 1735. His age was 77 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English clergyman and scientist whose theological and scientific writings bridged the gap between faith and empirical observation in the age of enlightenment. He was ordained in May 1681. In 1682, he became vicar of Wargrave, Berkshire, and from 1689 to 1735, he was rector at Upminster, Essex. While at Upminster in 1716, he became a canon of Windsor, and the vestry minutes show that thereafter he divided his time between those two places. The parish registers of Upminster record his burial at St. Lawrence in 1735. However, the precise site of his grave is unknown, and in accordance with his wishes, there is no memorial to him in the church. In 1696, he published his Artificial Clockmaker, which went through several editions. The best known of his subsequent works are Physical Theology, published in 1713. Thomas Hearn. He was born in June 1678 and he died in June 1735. His age was 57 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Thomas Hearn was an English antiquarian and scholar known for his meticulous collection and publication of historical manuscripts, leaving an invaluable resource for future historians. A non-juror himself, he refused to take oath of allegiance to King George I, and early in 1716 he was deprived of his librarianship, and he was in fact locked out of the library. However, he continued to reside in Oxford and occupied himself in editing the English chroniclers. He refused several important academic positions, including the librarianship of the Bodleian and the Camden Professorship of Ancient History, rather than take the oaths. The readers of Hearn's works were devoted to them because of the depth of scholarship. Carlo Rossini, he was born in November 1653 and he died in January 1735. His age was 81 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Carlo was a skilled Venetian diplomat and statesman who served as Doge of Venice, playing a pivotal role in balancing power dynamics in 18th century Europe. By the end of the 17th century, the Republic of Venice was losing ground on its constant diplomatic and military struggle with the Turkish Empire, so there was great need of diplomats such as Carlo, who had both the education and the requisite personal fortune to qualify for the diplomatic service. Starting his career of public service at 26, running the Venetian arsenal and dockyard, Carlo became a diplomat and was sent as ambassador to Madrid in 1691. As the ambassador to Vienna in July 1698, he was organizing the visit of the Russian Tsar Peter the Great to Venice, but that tour was failed because of the Streltsy revolt in Moscow. Later, he represented Venice during the negotiations at Karlowitz. John Akeles, he was born in 1668 and he died in January 1735. His age was 67 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. John Akeles was an English composer whose contributions to theatrical music and court compositions earned him significant acclaim in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. Akeles was very active as a composer for the theater, and from the 1690s wrote a large amount of incidental music, including music for Congreve's Love for Love, John Dryden's The Spanish Friar, and William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Jointly with Henry Purcell, he wrote incidental music for Thomas Durfee's Don Quixote. He became a composer to Drury Lane Theatre in 1693, and when some of the actors broke off to form their own company at Lincoln's Inn Fields in 1695, he composed music for them as well, including for John Dennis's Rinaldo and Armida. He wrote music for the coronation of Queen Anne and a number of songs. Polyxena of Hesse-Rotenberg, she was born in September 1706 and she died in January 1735. Her age was 28 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. Polyxena was an Italian queen consort whose marriage to Charles Emmanuel III helped secure alliances for the Kingdom of Sardinia. The mother of the future victor, Amadeus III. She was the Queen of Sardinia from 1730 until her death in 1735, when King Victor Amadeus announced his decision to return to the throne after having abdicated in 1730. She used her influence over her husband to have his father imprisoned at the castle of Moncalieri, where he was joined for a while by his morganatic wife, Anna Canales de Cumiana, Polyxena's former lady of the bedchamber. In an 1869 history of the House of Savoy, Francesco Bridari wrote that despite the fact Polixena was praised for goodness of the character and beautiful virtues, her father-in-law advised her to take care to maintain separate quarters from her husband for prudence's sake. Maria Clementina Sobieska. She was born in July 1702 and she died in January 1735. Her age was 32 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was scorbutic disease. She was a titular Queen of England, Scotland, and Ireland by marriage to James Francis Edward Stuart, a Jacobite claimant to the throne of Britain, being one of Europe's wealthiest heiresses from inheriting vast estate in Poland from her paternal grandfather. She was betrothed to James, Prince of Wales, the exiled son of James II and seventh. King George I of Great Britain was opposed to the marriage because he feared that the union might produce heirs to James Francis Edward's claim to his throne. To placate him, Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor, had her arrested while on her way to Italy to marry James Francis Edward. She was confined in Innsbruck Castle, but eventually the gods were deceived, and with the help of Charles Vaughan, Maria escaped to Bologna, where for safety from her further intrusions. Daniel Gottlieb Messerschmidt. He was born in September 1685 and he died in March 1735. His age was 49 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Daniel was an ethnic German physician, naturalist, and geographer who lived in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and later in the Russian Empire. He was among the first to conduct a scientific exploration of Siberia, which led to unearthing the first fossil mammoth. He used two simple utensils for collecting data and artifacts, written diary notes and boxes, establishing a tradition for naturalist exploration to last a century. In Tobolsk, he met the Swedish Lieutenant Colonel Philip Johan von Strahlenberg, who had been taken prisoner at the Battle of Poltava and exiled to Siberia. Strahlenberg accompanied him during several expeditions and later published some of Daniel's observations. He never became a member of the Academy of Sciences and died in poverty in 1735. Francis II Rakoczy. He was born in March 1676 and he died in April 1735. His age was 59 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Francis II was a Hungarian nobleman and freedom fighter whose efforts to resist Habsburg domination left an indelible mark on Hungarian history and national identity. He was also Prince of Transylvania, an imperial prince, and a member of the Order of Golden Fleece. Today, he is considered as a national hero in Hungary, although the Hungarian parliament offered Rakoczy the royal crown. He refused it, choosing instead the temporary title of the ruling prince of Hungary. Rakoczy intended to bear his military-sounding title only during the anti-Habsburg War of Independence. By refusing the royal crown, he proclaimed to Hungary that it was not his personal ambition that drove the war of liberation against the Habsburg dynasty. Samuel Wesley. He was born in December 1662 and he died in April 1735. His age was 72 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Samuel Wesley was an English clergyman and poet whose legacy includes not only his literary contributions but also his influence on the early Methodist movement through his sons. He studied at dissenting academies under Edward Veal in Stepney and then Charles Morton in Newington Green, where Gale had lived. Daniel Defoe also attended Morton's school. This school was situated probably on the site of the current Unitarian Church. Contemporaneously with Wesley, Samuel resigned his place and his annual scholarship among the dissenters. After that, he walked all the way to Oxford, where he enrolled at Exeter College as a poor scholar. He functioned as a servitor, which means he sustained himself financially by writing upon wealthy students. He also published a small book of poems entitled Maggots, or Poem on Several Subjects, never before handled in 1685. Piero Gatti. He was born in September 1663 and he died in June 1735. His age was 71 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Piero was an Italian composer whose refined Baroque compositions showcased his mastery of musical forms and sacred music traditions. From 1685, he became a member of the confraternity Santa Maria della Monte, for whom he composed most of his 17 oratorios from 1728. Gatti also held mainly honorary post of Maestro di Cappella in piano near Urbino in the last years of his life. His sacred works include 4 masses. Fellow Bolognese composer Giuseppe Maria Giacchini a permanent position in the orchestra of the Cathedral of Bologna. The Albergates were one of the most eminent families of the Bolognese nobility, and Count Piero Albergati himself was ambassador, confidant of Leopold I, Emperor of Austria, member of the City Council of Elders, and Gonfaloniere of the city of Bologna. Johan Ker. He was born in December 1651 and he died in July 1735. His age was 83 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Johann was a German composer and organist whose keyboard works and innovations in Baroque music earned him a lasting place in music history. He was one of the most important keyboard composers of his day, highly esteemed by, among others, George Frederick Handel, a prolific composer of church and secular music. He published several dozen of his works, and others survive in manuscripts. However, hundreds were lost when Zittau was destroyed by fire in 1757 during the 7 Years' War. His keyboard music places him among the most important German composers of his time. His contemporaries praised his contrapuntal skill, evident in the extant fugues and ricercars. Johann Mattheson was particularly impressed with Krieger's double fugues, remarking that he knew nobody who surpassed Krieger in this form except Handel. Thanks for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Have a nice day.